They say some crime scenes feel loud even when the entire house is silent. And that morning, detectives swore they could feel the walls breathing. The home was tidy, organized, almost too peaceful for what had happened inside. But the body lying on the cold wooden floor told a very different story. No forced entry. No sign of struggle. No neighbors heard a thing. And yet the victim's face carried an expression of pure terror, like whatever they saw in their final seconds wasn't human. Officers had seen brutal scenes before, but this one made even the experienced investigators step back and steady their breath. But before we go any further, you need to understand one thing. This was not an ordinary case. This was not an ordinary victim, and the truth behind this murder would leave everyone speechless. When Detective Rowan stepped inside the house, the air felt thick, unnaturally heavy. He noticed something strange immediately. Tiny scratch marks on the wooden floor, but not in the way someone fights back. These were circular, rhythmic, almost like the victim had been turning, moving in circles. It didn't make sense. Nothing did. The victim, 34-year-old Daniel Rhodes, was found lying on his side, one hand stretched outward, as if reaching for something invisible. There were no signs of blunt force trauma, no defensive wounds, nothing that indicated an attacker had physically harmed him, but his heart had simply stopped. Except Daniel had no history of cardiac issues, no drugs in his system, no sign of poisoning. The coroner would later say it was like his body shut down from fear. But fear of what? That question would haunt investigators for months. Daniel wasn't a troubled man. In fact, just hours before his death, he was seen laughing with his sister over a video call. He had dinner plans the next evening. His life looked stable, controlled, predictable, until the moment it wasn't. Rowan walked through the house methodically, observing every detail. The kitchen lights were still on. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on the counter. A chair was slightly pushed back, like someone had sat there minutes earlier. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. Even the front door was locked from the inside. But in the living room, where Daniel's body lay, something felt off. Something the detective couldn't put into words. It wasn't until he noticed the small recording device on the table that the investigation shifted from confusing to chilling. A voice recorder, still running, still blinking red. Rowan's heart sank. Whatever Daniel experienced in his final moments, it might be on that tape. He picked it up carefully, signaled the forensic team, and stopped the recording. Later, when technicians played back the audio, everyone listening froze. The first part was ordinary. Daniel's voice sounded calm, almost bored, as if he was recording a note or testing the device. Then, something changed. His breathing suddenly quickened. He whispered something barely audible. Then came a sentence that would define the entire investigation. They're inside the house. Detectives exchanged horrified looks. Who was inside? No one else was found. No prints, no movement, no signs of another human being on the property. But Daniel's voice didn't sound confused. He sounded certain, terrified, but certain. The audio continued with soft footsteps. Daniel pacing, maybe circling, then something scraped across the floor, followed by a faint tapping sound. Not like a knock, more like someone or something touching the ground in intervals. "Stop," Daniel whispered. "Please, stop." His voice began trembling. Objects shifted. A chair moved. Then he said one last thing, his voice cracking. "I can see you." And then, silence. No scream, no thud, just silence. Doctors said he died within seconds after that moment. Investigators considered everything: hallucinations, paranoia, intruder, psychological break, but the evidence didn't support any of it. Daniel's life had no red flags. He hadn't been using any substances. He wasn't in debt. He had no enemies. He wasn't depressed. There was no sign of illness. So what did he see? What made him collapse in fear? To uncover the truth, detectives had to go backward in his life. That was the start of the reverse reconstruction, the new method Rowan insisted on using. Instead of building forward from the crime scene, He wanted to dismantle Daniel's last 72 hours minute by minute. The deeper they went, the stranger things became. Daniel's neighbors described him as friendly, quiet, polite, but one neighbor mentioned something unusual. On the night before his death, she saw him outside his house around 2 a.m., staring at his own living room window from the yard. Not moving, not speaking, just staring. When she called out his name, he didn't respond. He didn't even blink. He just slowly turned and went back inside. But the truly disturbing part, she saw someone else behind the window. A shadow, tall, unmoving. But she assumed it was a lamp or reflection, so she ignored it. Now she wasn't so sure. Detectives checked the security cameras. Daniel had multiple cameras around his home, but every single one of them malfunctioned within the same exact minute, not hours apart. Not due to weather, not due to wiring. All went dark simultaneously. Professional sabotage, remote tech hack, overheating. Experts ruled out everything. And then came the most terrifying discovery of all. Inside Daniel's phone was a message unsent, typed only halfway, time-stamped minutes before his death. It said, "They're not human." Rowan didn't believe in supernatural explanations. He didn't believe in urban legends, hallucinations, or unseen figures. He believed in facts, evidence, logic. But this case was slowly ripping logic apart. And he hadn't even discovered the basement yet, because behind the storage boxes and old tools, there was something hidden. Something Daniel clearly never intended for anyone to find. And whatever it was would change everything. Detective Rowan stared at the narrow wooden staircase leading to the basement. A place the forensic team hadn't fully examined yet. Something about the air down there felt wrong. It was colder, almost unnaturally still. Even the sound of his footsteps seemed swallowed by the darkness, instead of echoing back. When he reached the bottom, he saw nothing unusual at first. Just boxes, old furniture, tools. But as he moved deeper, he noticed a cabinet pushed tightly against the wall, heavier than it looked. The edges of the wooden floor beneath it were scratched, as if someone had dragged it into this exact position recently. Why would Daniel move a cabinet in the middle of the night? Rowan called 2 forensic officers for help. Together, they shifted the cabinet aside, and there it was, a thin, vertical line across the wall. A cut, barely visible. Rowan ran his fingers over it and felt a small metal catch, a hidden latch. He took a slow breath and pulled. The wall opened, and behind it was a small windowless room no bigger than a walk-in closet. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, but the switch didn't work. The light had burned out long ago. When they flashed their torches inside, the team froze. On the wall were pages, hundreds of them, torn from notebooks, printed screenshots, newspaper clippings, all taped in a chaotic pattern. But the strangest part wasn't the mess itself. It was what was written on those pages. Words, symbols, shapes, repeated over and over. I see them. They are here. They don't move until you look away. They stand behind the windows. They are patient. This wasn't random. This was obsession. Except Daniel had no history of obsession. No mental illness. No reason to hide any of this. Rowan leaned closer to the papers and noticed something else. Every symbol, every drawing, every scribble had one thing in common. A tall, slender figure. No facial features. No details. Just a silhouette. Always standing. Always watching. The detective felt a chill crawl up his spine. Was this what Daniel saw before he died? Was this what he typed about in that final message? They're not human. But why would he hide all this? Why not tell someone? One of the forensic officers called Rowan over to another corner of the small room. A small box sat there, carefully sealed. Inside were old videotapes, handwritten labels, dates, some from years ago. Rowan picked one. The handwriting was Daniel's. It read, "Basement camera, do not watch alone." For a moment Rowan debated whether this was paranoia or a warning. They took the tapes upstairs to the lab. It was past midnight, but no one wanted to go home. There was a tension in the air, like everyone knew something irreversible was about to be revealed. The tape began with static. Then a faint image appeared. It was Daniel's basement weeks before his death. Everything looked normal. Boxes, stacked neatly. The cabinet still in its usual place. Daniel walked into frame. He set the camera down and pointed it at the far wall. His expression wasn't fearful, just tired. He sat down on a chair in front of the camera and stared at the wall for almost a full minute. Then he spoke softly. "If they ever find me, if I ever disappear, someone needs to see this." His voice cracked slightly, but he wasn't panicking. He was resigned. "I don't know when they started coming. I don't know why they chose me, but they're always in the corner of my eyes. When I turn, they're gone. When I look away, they come close." He swallowed hard. "I can't prove they're real. Every photo, every video, they don't show up. They know how cameras work. They know when I'm watching." Daniel stood and moved out of frame. He came back holding something, one of those scribbled drawings from the hidden room. This is the only way I can describe them. He pinned the drawing on the wall behind him. And then, it happened. The lights flickered. The camera glitched. A frame dropped. Another. Another. And then, for a split second, something appeared in the corner of the room behind Daniel. A dark shape. Human-like. Motionless. The room in the lab went silent. The technicians rewound, slowed, enhanced. But the figure didn't show again in the paused frame. It was like the camera refused to capture it clearly. Only the movement, only the distortion. Rowan felt a cold sweat form on his neck. Whatever Daniel had been seeing, it wasn't imaginary. At least not to him. In the final minutes of the tape, Daniel whispered, "If they ever appear fully, it means they're not hiding anymore." And then the video ended. Rowan turned off the screen. The room felt heavier. No one spoke. The next day, Rowan began the final part of his reverse reconstruction. Daniel's last 24 hours. His phone logs, messages, GPS traces, surveillance footage from nearby buildings. And what they found changed everything. At 5:42 p.m., the day before his death, Daniel drove to a parking lot outside the city. A place he had no reason to visit. He stayed inside his car for 11 minutes. Cameras showed no one near him. No one opening the door. No one entering or leaving his vehicle. But Daniel's phone microphone picked up something. Something chilling. A whisper. Not Daniel's. A low voice said, "You can't run from what's already inside." Rowan replayed it 5 times. 7. 10. Tech experts confirmed. Not an audio glitch. Not wind. Not feedback. There was a second voice. Daniel went home immediately after that. Less than 12 hours later, he was dead. The investigation ended officially with no suspect. No break-in, no weapon, no logical explanation. The report stated sudden, unexplained death. A phrase detectives use when the truth is too strange to categorize. But Rowan couldn't let it go. The last scene of the case file describes him walking alone through Daniel's empty house. One final time. He stopped in the living room, right where Daniel fell. The sunlight hit the floor softly, making the silence almost feel alive. And then Rowan noticed something. On the floor, barely visible unless you stood at just the right angle. Another circular scratch, fresh, thin, perfectly curved. Like someone or something had been standing there recently. Watching. Rowan stepped back, his heart tightening in his chest. For the first time since he became a detective, he felt genuinely afraid. Not of a killer, not of a crime, but of the possibility that Daniel Rhodes wasn't hallucinating, wasn't paranoid, wasn't imagining anything. Maybe he saw something the rest of us aren't supposed to see. Maybe his final whisper was right. Maybe they're inside the house.